Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
you gotta be confident about your Achilles when you show up.
Yeah, I mean, I got him at 2.
And Adam LaRue. Don't hope to be great and dominate.
All right. Welcome back into Operation Domination. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader. Make sure you download the show on your favorite podcast app or find our video content on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. It is injury inquiry time for week 12. And God, week 11 was brutal with the amount of like superstar fantasy football players that were hurt and it was just awful. So, of course, I had to make sure Dr. Brian Scott was available to come back onto the show from the Injured List podcast. Brian, how's it going? Let me ask you this actually to lead off.
Yeah.
As a injury professional, and this is how you make your waves in the fantasy football world, and you're absolutely fantastic at it. But it has to be a bittersweet thing that like you pretty much can make your name known because of everybody else's peril. Like, no, or like, is it okay?
I like to put a little bit more of a positive spin on it, Dan.
That's true.
I'm looking out for them, to be honest. I'm hoping that they're getting treated the right way. I'm trying to put some information out there, maybe to really get the message somehow relayed to them and their medical staff. And letting them know as well that, hey, there's guys like me out there that know what's going on, that know what happened behind the scenes, and keeping an eye on them, making sure things are done right. So I try to look at it like that. Plus, I'm also helping the fantasy community by giving them a heads up so they can perform at a much higher level. And maybe some of those newbies that are out there that don't know what to do in these situations. So I try to look at it in a more positive light.
I like that. Dr. Brian Scott's in regular old Jolly St. Nick in the holidays. I love it.
And I don't wish ill will on anyone, of course. I hate seeing sports injuries. I myself have been involved in some major sports injuries, so I know I've been on that side of the coin as well, and it's no fun, and I don't wish that on anybody either. So
no, and the fantasy owners are all clawing their eyes out right now, too. Let's start off the show, though, with that positive light that you were talking about, because Joe Burrow has now practiced in full 2 days in a row in advance of week 12. And people are actually starting to wonder, is it this week, not next week, that he returns? What do you think?
Man, this is a crazy story. I never would have expected we'd be having this conversation, to be honest with you. So I'm kind of surprised at how this is all unfolding. I still think it's very early for him to make a comeback here, but yet here we are. He's doing it. And it sounds like they're gearing up for possibly this week. I honestly don't think it's going to be this week. I think if we do see him get on the field, it's probably, and I think I said this when we found out that they opened up that 21-day window. I said that it's probably going to be closer to the end of that 21 days, which would be, I think, next week. So I don't think they're going to rush it. It's great that he's able to get through successive days of practice. But as I always say, you cannot truly simulate game-like conditions in the practice field, no matter how hard you try. So I think they still are, or should be, very cautiously optimistic here. And I'm anticipating that it'll be at the tail end of that 21-day window where they'll make a decision about whether he's going to suit up and actually play. Now, what may have kind of ramped things up is that Joe Flacco is dealing with an AC joint sprain in his shoulder, and he's been playing through that the last couple of weeks. So that could potentially be something that's been hurrying this along a little bit. So if Joe Flacco can recover, feel better, and get through that injury, that may also play into this as well, into the decisions here. So something to keep an eye on. It sounds like Flacco is still practicing. He might be somewhat limited at practice, if I'm not mistaken, but he is still the starter until we hear otherwise. But yes, it's a very surprising the way things have unfolded. I thought for sure we would not be seeing Joe Burrow back anytime soon, if at all this season. And yeah, here we are, week 12. It's not like there's still a substantial amount of games left. The question is, do you risk putting him back out there if you're not going to make the playoffs, which it doesn't look like the Bengals are. So,
Well, and that's part of it. I think so. Two things that you laid out there, which is why this became such an interesting conversation to begin with. One, Joe Flacco is banged up, practicing limited capacity on his throwing shoulder for the last 2 days now. And this is coming out of the bye, mind you. So this is a legitimate thing that he's dealing with. And then when you're watching Joe Burrow over there practice in full, you're kind of like, maybe we don't wait till next week. I don't know. So that part makes it interesting. But the other aspect of this is to what the other issue that you laid out. Are you going to make the playoffs? Well, you have a hell of a lot better chance if you start winning out today. And you probably have a better chance of winning if Joe Burrow is under center, whether he's 100% or not. They already are not going to have Ja'Marr Chase this week because of the suspension that he, was spitting on Jalen Ramsey, caught on film, tried to lie about it. And they're like, no, we can see you spitting on him. So he's suspended for a week. So now you're like, well, how do you get some juice? How do you still try to stay alive in this thing? Because the AFC North, no one's running away with the AFC North right now, which is why they have a chance to still be in it. I don't know. There's my gut is telling me Joe Burrow is going to play this weekend. As much as I think they want to wait another week, my gut is telling me it's going to happen this week.
You might be right, Dan. You might be right.
It's very, very interesting. So let's dive into the fantasy of it all. Two scenarios here. If Joe Burrow plays, and right now Joe Burrow is not in my rankings. All right. I'm waiting till I actually get that clarification before I put him in my rankings. I have Joe Flacco ranked as a quarterback 17. Again, no Ja'Marr Chase this week, and he kind of came back down to earth right before the bye anyway. But if Joe Burrow's out there, can you start him right away? And I look back to last week. We had an example of this. Brock Purdy came back. And I sat there, and Brock Purdy, by the time it was all said and done, and I was done my modeling, my processing, and everything else, he was my quarterback 10 on the week and going into the week. And by golly, I was right. It was like we were able to plug him in right away. 3 touchdowns right off the rip. Joe Burrow, you haven't had him, so you've had other options you've had to plug into this point. Depending on what those options are, Joe Burrow might be cracking my top 12 first week back. It's quite a possibility that's going to be the case. So just keep your eyes on that. If you have Joe Burrow, you might be able to plug him in right away. Because if Brock Purdy showed you anything was that, it might be okay. So we'll have to keep our eyes on that. Lamar Jackson was dealing with the ankle issue, didn't practice yesterday. It didn't sound like there was a ton of concern, but again, it's Lamar Jackson. When he doesn't practice, we got to talk about it. So what do you got?
Yeah. Well, he was also coming off that hamstring knee issue from a few weeks ago, which he finally came back from that. And then this ankle issue popped up. But he did practice in full today. And it didn't sound like it was anything serious. Of course, I think I said that about his hamstring. And then lo and behold, he sat out a week. So I could be way off base here again. But again, all reports coming out of Baltimore are that it was nothing serious. And he returned to full practice. And it's early enough in the week. I think we'll see him suit up this weekend.
I think the Ravens learned their lesson from the last time around. They can't list him as a full participant in practices and then not play him. So that was the whole issue. I don't see them making the same mistake twice. He's playing against the New York Jets. Lamar Jackson's in my top 5. It sounds like he's going to be good to go. What about Jackson Dart dealing with that concussion? Do we think he makes a return after missing a game?
Well, I think it's kind of up in the air, 50-50 at this point. I know he did some limited stuff at practice, but, to get through the concussion protocol, he'll have to get more done before that. And again, he'll have to be cleared by an independent neurological consultant. I think they're going to probably tread cautiously with him, given the fact that a lot of criticism has been thrown the Giants' way for how they handled the last injury, because apparently there was 4 separate occasions where he was evaluated for a concussion leading up to the one he got, and then finally missed some time because of. So I think they'll go back and look at that and say, maybe let's settle this down and get a handle on it and not rush him back. So there's a good chance we might not see him, and Jameis Winston will get to start again. And as a Giants fan, at this point, I don't really care, except that I want them to protect their investment. I mean, they were high on this kid. We've seen some great things coming out of his first season in the league already. Let's not throw him to the wolves for nothing. And, pretty much that's what the Giants season has become, is a big fat nothing. So let's get him healthy. Let's make sure he's right before we risk his career. So a 50-50 split on this, but I don't think we're going to see him if he doesn't get a full session in by Friday.
Yeah, it's so they started off the week with a super optimism, and they just he's progressed a little bit, but he hasn't really progressed the way you would like him to after already having missed a game. And it seems very similar to with CJ Stroud and his progression. And CJ Stroud, winds up being ruled out for a second game in a row. Now, I know with Stroud, his game wound up being on a Thursday, so he had a little bit less time to get going here, but it does seem to be following a similar pattern where it doesn't seem to be quite out of the woods yet.
Yeah. The thing with concussions, Dan, is you can feel good one day at practice, even if you're doing limited stuff, you can get through that and feel fine. And then suddenly the next day you can wake up with a headache still, or maybe some other symptoms, and be right back where you started the day before. So it's not unusual for that. That's why concussions, getting through the protocol is not quite so simple. When you're looking from the outside, things can change overnight.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, you're talking about bounce back symptoms the next day. Absolutely. It's one of the biggest injuries for that. So fantasy wise, how do we attack this whole thing? As of right now, I do have Jackson Dart in my rankings, and I have him at quarterback 9. If he goes against the Detroit Lions, he's going to have to run. They're going to have to put up points. They're going to be trailing from behind. Like, I know the Detroit played poorly against the Eagles. Eagles have an elite defense. Giants do not. They're going to have to come back from behind. There's going to be fantasy points to be had there, especially come the second half. So with the way he has played, I do, as of right now, have him as a top 10 quarterback. We'll see if he's going to be active. I am a little nervous because they've already talked about this with the Giants, that with Jackson Dart, that while he's been out, they have had conversations with him about, hey, you need to tone down the running a little bit because you're going to get yourself hurt. And he's not an overly big guy. Here's my problem with that. And I apologize to you in advance, Brian, as a Giants fan.
I kind of know what's coming, I think.
Yeah. Jackson Dart's not a good quarterback. Okay. So if you're going to take away his rushing and make him more of a passer, I'm not impressed with his passing. I'm not impressed with his reads. I'm not impressed with his accuracy. And it's funny to me, I have these conversations with people all the time, and I'm just sitting there. And when I've watched the Giants play and Jackson Dart was having his success, I just sit there. I'm like, if you just put a quarterback spy right in the middle, this whole offense goes away. The whole thing would disappear because all he wants to do is attack the middle of the field with the tight ends or take off and run. You clog the middle of the field, he can't do either. Because while he's a decent runner, he's not Lamar Jackson level. He's not Kyler Murray level. He's not Josh Allen level. He doesn't have that kind of speed. So that's what worries me about Jackson Dart. Like, you take away a little bit of his rushing, and he might become a fantasy dud. So I'm a little bit nervous right now with that. If he doesn't play, on the flip side of that, Jameis Winston, unfortunately, and we'll talk about Darius Slayton a little bit later, but unfortunately, he just has not very good receivers to go to right now. Like, he doesn't. And he should have had at least three picks in that pass game. They were all dropped by the Green Bay Packers. It could have been brutal. It wasn't. He kept them in it, but it could have been brutal. He super spread the offense, too. Like Isaiah Hodgins, who they just signed off, the street, was the leading wide receiver. So now he's like, okay, well, now I can't even count on Wan'Dale Robinson, who had been looking pretty good since Malik Neighbors left, to actually get the targets I'm anticipating him getting, because I feel like he should be the lead receiver, especially if there's no Darius Slayton. And then Theo Johnson, who's been very good, low-end tight end 1 with Jackson Dart. Now he becomes a guy that, maybe you're more of a mid-level tight end 2 if you're going to spread this whole thing out. Tyrone Tracy would be a mid-level RB3 because he has a tough matchup on the ground against the Lions, even though he'll probably get worked in enough to keep some kind of fantasy flex value for you. And they were already mixing Devin Singletary. So I don't have high hopes if it's either one of these quarterbacks, but I will say this. I do think Jackson Dart helps a Wan'Dale Robinson. He helps a Theo Johnson because, again, he's going to attack that middle of the field. So in that sense, for the guys that you are thinking about starting to begin with, it might be a Jackson Dart thing. We'd rather have him out there. The only caveat to that, and again, we'll talk about him later, but Darius Slayton. If Darius Slayton were to play, that's the beneficiary you want with Jameis Winston. The deep play threat down the field guy. That's the guy who could pop off unexpectedly. We'll talk about him later, though. Let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. Well, it's been a while since Aaron Rodgers has been on this list. I've been impressed. Yeah, he's dealing with a wrist issue. So what do you got for us, Bri?
Well, they said it was a small fracture. We're not sure exactly which bone. I have a few theories as to what it might be, but non-surgical management. He's pushing to play, and it sounds like they're probably going to let him play. He might have a brace or something on that wrist, but it's his non-throwing hand, so it shouldn't really affect him much. The only thing it might affect is him taking a snap from under center, and possibly handing it off if he has to use the left hand. But other than that, I mean, it's not really something huge. I don't think it's going to be a major player as far as fantasy relevancy is concerned.
Yeah. I mean, why not let him play? It's going to be his last year. He's over 40. You want to play, dude, and get yourself killed? Go ahead. Who cares? And it's not even like Mason Rudolph was bad in relief of him. He was 12 of 16 for 127 yards and a touchdown. It wasn't even terrible. So if you're looking at DK Metcalf, who's been maddening, he's nothing more than a low-end wide receiver 3 anyway, with the way they've utilized him within this offense. It's been absolutely atrocious. But you're just looking at DK Metcalf and you're looking at the running backs. Whether that's Mason Rudolph, whether that's Aaron Rodgers, doesn't matter either way. And with the tight ends, you want to play Russian roulette with the Steelers tight ends? Go for it. Be my guest. Which one's going to produce? Never know. It's never going to be the same one twice. That much I can guarantee you. So you care about the running backs. We'll talk about Jalen Warren a little bit. And DK Metcalf as a guy that, well, in theory, you could bust a touchdown. It just hasn't happened to this point. So I think, honestly, whether it's Rodgers or Mason Rudolph, you're only playing DK Metcalf if you don't have better options right now. And with 4 teams on bye, you might not. But that's kind of where we are on DK, regardless. Ugh, it's so ugly. So ugly. Oh, God, we got to talk about this. Okay. Brian, so I have so many fantasy football teams. And we're going to talk about both players at the same time because I can't have conversation with one without the other.
Oh, okay.
I have so many fantasy football teams dependent on Drake London. I was a big Drake London guy. Everything shouted to me that this was the year for a breakout year. And it started off slow. And then finally, last 4 weeks, Drake London has looked like that top 5 guy that I thought he had a real legitimate chance to be. And then not only does he get knocked out with a PCL injury himself, but then Michael Penix, who you can say what you want about Michael Penix, he's good at getting Drake London the football, now gets ACL in his, I guess it's the opposite knee from the one he tore twice. Okay, I guess that's kind of good. I don't know. But even when Drake London does come back, I'm like, I got to deal with Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
I don't know. So break this whole thing down for me. Michael Penix with the knee, Drake London with the PCL, and we'll just have this conversation now.
So I spoke about Michael Penix on my podcast when I released it on Tuesday. It should be no surprise, unfortunately. He has a long-standing injury history dating back to college, in fact, I think like 2018 or 2019, when he had his first ACL injury to his right knee. He also missed a substantial amount of seasons because of a fractured clavicle and other various injuries as well, and then had a repeat ACL injury to the right knee again, I think in like 2022. So it's not like he's a stranger to season-ending surgically repaired injuries. And he was featured as one of the players in my NFL draft special that I do every year. And it's no fluke that these guys are on that list. You know, it's kind of like playing roulette at the casino. Like you're taking a gamble when you're picking these players coming out of college with major injury histories. And so it really should not be a surprise. Now, in 8 seasons of collegiate and NFL football, he has missed 5 complete seasons due to injury. So that right there, I mean, kind of should really just kind of sum it up. The issue with this particular injury is this is going to roll into next year, in my opinion, without a doubt. And it's going to take a substantial chunk of next year for him to get back on the field as well. And I think that's just because of, again, the history with him. I would expect that this is probably going to be a 9 to 12 month recovery like we normally would see, but I think it's going to probably extend out to that 12-month mark because it was a real innocent looking play. It was a non-contact ACL, which is not something you want to see, but it makes sense in a guy who already had a previous double ACL injury to the other opposite side. It's not uncommon to see that. So very, very big injury for him in his career. It doesn't help anything. He's only been in the league, like a year and a half, 2 years. It's barely been, he got drafted in 2024, right? Or something like barely been. And then, you look at a guy like Drake London. He's also only been in the league for a short period of time. He's had some various injuries over the years that have kind of restricted some of his gameplay, but at least the PCL is not like the ACL. Again, this is a non-surgical injury, similar, though, to like Brock Bowers that we just saw. and who was the other player that just had this too? Ricky Pearsall.
Ricky Pearsall, yeah.
Yeah. So, they're saying week to week. And again, keep in mind, Pearsall was week to week and missed 6 weeks. So it really is a matter of how quickly he can recover, whether or not his knee feels stable or not. And that, unfortunately, we're getting toward the end here. That could extend into the end of the season.
Here's what I will say on that, and take this for a grain of salt. I grant you, but Drake London himself does seem like he was like week 13. I plan on being back, and I only throw that out. And again, it's a player thing. We've heard players talk all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean a lot. The only thing I will say to that, I didn't hear that from Ricky Pearsall. I didn't hear that from Brock Bowers, where they were like, "Yeah, we're going to be back real soon." Like that never came out of their mouths. So, go ahead.
Well, two things. One, Brock Bowers had a bone bruise that was found on MRI, sure. And that was the thing that really slowed his recovery down because that's very painful. Those take a long time to get better. And number two, Ricky Pearsall, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, actually did try to come back and was on the practice field several times, but yet never quite made it back to game play and got cleared. So he struggled coming back, even though at times he was a limited participant during practices. So I don't think we're really going to know just how ready Drake London is until he gets out there in the practice field. And as of right now, he has not yet practiced.
100%. If you don't take any solace, what I do take solace out of, I should say, when he says that, is that he wants to come back. So, and I think that's important in this context where we're at this part of the season. The Falcons are not going to be a playoff team with Kirk Cousins. Drake London could easily decide, I want to shut this thing down and just come back next year. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to get paid when it's time for me to get paid anyway. I'm Drake London. I will take solace in the idea that he wants to come back, and he's making that clear that he wants to. Meaning, I think you at least have a better chance this doesn't turn into a season-ending thing at this point. And that's the kind of what I'm laying out there. Whether it's week 13 or week 14, I don't know. Me personally, I'm thinking week 14 or week 15 is more likely. But it does tell me that he wants to come back, which I think is a big thing at this juncture in the context. Let's talk a little bit about Dylan Gabriel. No, I'm sorry. I got to back up and talk about the fantasy aspects. Kirk Cousins sucks. Yeah. So it's really, really bad. He doesn't have an NFL arm anymore. So I'm not really... Even with Drake London out, I'm not particularly strong on Darnell Mooney here. When Kirk Cousins came in and played a couple weeks ago, whatever it was, Kyle Pitts had 9 catches and 9 targets. Not for a ton of yards, but that can give you a stable floor, especially if you're talking about half-point and full-point PPR leagues. So I would say Kyle Pitts becomes a streaming option based on the usage, based on where Kirk Cousins can actually throw the football. And while this is a bit of a ceiling limited factor on Bijan Robinson, of course you're going to play Bijan, but maybe Bijan is not the top 3 fantasy running back like he had been. Maybe he's more like top 6. And look, it kind of stinks at this point of the year to kind of have that distinction, but that just might be the case right now because the whole offense is going to take a hit with Kirk Cousins, even against the Saints team. I don't think you're going to see as good of an Atlanta Falcons offense. All right, so with that, let's talk about Dylan Gabriel getting the concussion issue, and it sounds like the Browns are already naming Shedeur Sanders as a starting quarterback, but this is injury factory, so let's talk about Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah,
what's the update?
He's been struggling to get through the concussion protocol. I don't even think he stepped on the practice field at all yet this week. Again, that does not bode well to getting through the protocol. You have to get some type of physical activity and practices in order to make it through that protocol and get cleared by the neurological team. So it doesn't look like this week's going to be a return at all.
Yeah. So like I said, Browns have already pretty much named Shedeur Sanders starting quarterback. And when he came in for Dylan Gabriel, I thought to myself, the Browns fans were all excited. And I was like, you know what? Fine. Like, Dylan Gabriel is obviously not the franchise guy. Why you wasted a 3rd round pick on him, I will never understand. So why not? Let's see what Shedeur has. How much worse can it get? Oh boy, was that question answered real fast. He was 4 of 16 for 47 yards and an interception, and probably should have been another one. He'll be better, okay, than he was a week ago with a full practice reps and actually preparing to start for the game. It will. I mean, it should be better. I don't want to get too strong on it. It should be better. But dear God, that was so awful. Like, to the point where I don't know if anybody beside Quinshon Judkins is fantasy relevant. And to some degree, that had already been the case, but at least you were able to like have some confidence in plugging and playing Harold Fannin with the way he had played and been utilized over the past couple of weeks. Jerry Jeudy had some pops here and there. Quinshon Judkins, and I don't want to touch anything else if there's any other option I can pivot to until I see something that looks positive, because everything that we didn't like about Shedeur Sanders, and I was a harsh critic on him, but mostly in the vein of I didn't think he was a first-round pick, and people were promoting him as a first-round pick, and he didn't want to being that. So I kind of did a 360 here. I'm like, all right, well, you were drafted where I think you should have been, and now I think people are going the other way where they're too harsh on you, and I don't know why we still have the expectations of the first-rounder when he wasn't even drafted as such. But anyway, whatever. Neither here nor there. The knocks on him: holding on to the football, not being as mobile as you would like, not getting through his reads and progressions, not having an NFL arm. That all reared its ugly head on Sunday, like all of it at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just might be a little bit brutal. All right, so let's talk about the running backs. Let's talk about Josh Jacobs dealing with this knee issue. What do you got here?
I'm not overly concerned. It originally came out that it was just a contusion. I think he actually had some tests earlier in the week and didn't show any structural damage. He was limited in practice on Thursday. I think that we will see him. I think he wants to play. He made it clear earlier in the week, and actually after the injury happened, that it didn't sound like it was anything serious. He should be ready. And he looked good on the practice field. I saw some video clips of him running around. And I'm optimistic. They say, it's probably just a contusion, but I'm not exactly sure if it was the knee or the thigh area. Either way, it doesn't sound like it was a bad injury, so we should see him back. Could be carrying a questionable tag, though, up until Friday. So pay attention to the injury report on Friday. And then if he's still on there Friday, he could be a game-time decision. They might see what he can do in warm-ups. So he might be somebody you have to keep an eye on as you get closer to kickoff, too.
Another player coming out and saying, if I miss a game, it's going to be one game. That's going to be. But in Josh Jacobs' case, the proof's kind of in the pudding, where like he is putting in the work of the practice reps where you can kind of trust that to truly be the case. So if you picked up Emmanuel Wilson, like you should have, I mean, you're holding on to him. There's still a chance here they decide to keep Jacobs out for 1 week to make sure he's fully ready to go going into the next week. Definitely a possibility, but there's more of a chance than what it looked like in the beginning of the week that Jacobs may just go out there and play anyway. So keep your eyes on that. We'll see how that all breaks down. If it isn't Josh Jacobs, just to give you guys a quick little rundown here, Emmanuel Wilson did outsnap Chris Brooks 39-5 in that game. He had 11 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown and 1 catch for 9 yards. The Vikings, they have allowed the 13th most fantasy points to the running back position, which means it's a decent matchup. But they've also allowed the 10th most rushing yards to the running back position, which is good for Emmanuel Wilson because they don't let up as much in the passing game, and Emmanuel Wilson's not really involved when it comes to the passing game. So I do think he is a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 if Josh Jacobs is gone with the expected workload he could get. But again, that's going to be a fluid situation into the weekend. Hit me up at DanMaterFF if you need any start-sit questions for that one. Jalen Warren, ankle issue. Another one that I feel like is looking a little bit more positive than we thought it was going to earlier this week.
Well, he was a limited participant on Thursday, but keep in mind, I think he had an ankle issue earlier in the year, maybe even coming out of preseason, if I'm not mistaken. And this could be like one of these things like we saw Jonathan Taylor deal with a few years ago, where it's just like this lingering ankle instability thing that causes like repetitive injuries from time to time. Hopefully not, but you can also see when Jonathan Taylor finally got that ankle surgically repaired, how much success he's having now. So maybe Jalen Warren is dealing with something similar, but as of right now, he's a limited participant. He might carry a questionable tag. Again, another guy you should keep on as you get closer to keep an eye on as you get closer to kickoff.
Yeah, absolutely. Gainwell in his place, of course, had 81 receptions and 2 touchdowns. And another interesting note is that even before Jalen Warren got hurt in this game, Gainwell was playing a significant amount. That's always fluid with Arthur Smith. I get it. If Warren's out there, I'm plugging him in as a top 24 running back. But if it's not Warren and it is Gainwell, I'm also going to plug him in as a top 24 running back. One of the few things you can trust in the Steelers offense is that running back position, especially when you know where the touches are going to go. So keep your eyes on that. Either way, you have a starter in Pittsburgh. Rhamondre Stevenson dealing with that toe issue the last few weeks. What's the update on him?
So it sounds like they're trying to work him back in. He had a limited practice on Thursday as well. This could be kind of one of those things where they're going to slowly ramp him up and see what he can do at practice and how he responds to that. I'm not so sure we're going to see him just yet, but optimistic seeing him on the field taking some limited reps. We'll see what he's able to do Friday and then heading into the weekend. I'm sure he's going to carry a questionable tag. But if he's not going to go, they'll probably relegate him to doubtful on Friday.
Every Travion Henderson owner is biting their nails right now. You finally got the pop the last 2 weeks that you've been desperately waiting for. Like we hit a point in redraft leagues where people didn't know, like, do I just need to drop this guy? Like, it just wasn't getting any work. Then Antonio Gibson goes away due to injury. Rhamondre Stevenson finally goes away. And even that at first still wasn't enough because Terrell Jennings had to get involved for some reason. Whatever. But now he got the last 2 weeks where he hasn't just looked good. He's looked like the explosive prospect a lot of people thought he could be within this offense. Then you have a matchup against Cincinnati upcoming, who everybody's been running all over all season long. And this is the week Rhamondre Stevenson's going to come back. So now you have this, like, Henderson's playing Cincinnati. But Rhamondre's coming back, and God knows what Josh McDaniels is going to do because we've been burned by this guy in the past. Here's my advice. If you have Henderson, I don't care if Stevenson's back. I don't care if we don't know what McDaniels is going to do. It is Cincinnati, and he's looked too good to just be phased out completely. Play Travion Henderson. Play him in that spot you're going to play him in anyway. And just hope that maybe this will be the beginning of, even if Stevenson's healthy, Henderson's still the lead back. Maybe that'll be the case. My point of this is that no one really knows, other than you should still play Henderson against the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, so Bashaw Tootin ankle issue. Also, let's talk about Travis Etienne, who was dealing with the shoulder issue. We didn't know about that until after the game, but what you got?
Yeah, I think Tootin's been dealing with the ankle stuff on and off throughout the season, if I'm not mistaken. He might have even been on our list earlier in the year, too. But again, another guy, keep an eye on as you head into the weekend. He got a limited round of practice reps in on Thursday. Might ramp it up on Friday before getting a final designation heading into the weekend. And for sure, he'll carry a questionable tag. The question is going to be whether or not he's actually ready to go. And it's a little hard to predict. I'm not exactly sure what the injury is. Don't know when he picked it up, if this is this recurring chronic thing now that's set in, or if it's an acute injury that happened over the last weekend. But something to keep an eye on.
It was so as somebody who owns both Travis Etienne and Bashaw Tootin, okay, last Sunday was like, whoa, what we got going on here? Because all of a sudden Tootin was finally getting more work. Now, to your point, Brian, he had been dealing with an ankle issue for a while, okay, on and off. And this was the first time he was able to practice in full the entire week. And as a result, instead of playing less than LaQuint Allen, he was right there getting the hot hand playing ahead of Travis Etienne out of nowhere. Now he goes down, and they were doing a committee thing between the two of them. He looked explosive, like the prospect I think Bashaw Tootin could possibly be. Like I said, I think he's Jamal Charles 2.0 at some point in his career. And I'm going to keep standing on that statement 100%. But then you have Travis Etienne, who you have to play. He gets too much volume. You have to play him. So I was looking forward to this game they have Arizona this week, a great matchup. Like, okay, maybe Bashaw Tootin be out of the way, so I know Travis Etienne's going to get to work. Now, they're both practicing in a limited capacity. They're both banged up, and I have no idea which way they're going to decide to go. It's very much similar to the And the problem is, I honestly don't know who's going to be healthier come Sunday. No idea. Here's what I'll say to that point. Treat Bashaw Tootin as a handcuff and go with Travis Etienne. He's been the bell cow. He's been the lead workload. That's what we have to trust for the majority of the season. There's some talk that maybe Travis Etienne actually had a shoulder thing while the game was going on, and maybe that's why Tootin was getting as much run as he was during the game. We just didn't know about it until afterwards. So any idea with that, I would just say, hey, play Travis Etienne. It's a good match against Arizona. Treat tooting like the handcuff until we get more information. That's how you approach this. What's the update on Bucky Irving?
Just that he's limited, but we saw him last week kind of taking some snaps in a walkthrough, which really didn't tell us much. Now he's getting some limited reps and possibly ramping it up. I still don't think we see him back this week, unless something happens Friday and he gets a full session in. I'm not convinced that he's ready because he hasn't done anything in so long. I would be shocked if they just kind of threw him out there. Don't forget he's dealing with 2 issues: a shoulder subluxation and a foot sprain, of which we don't know the severity. So, kind of risky to throw him out there without at least getting a full week of work in.
Oh, it absolutely is. So this is what I've gotten from the coaching staff, and this applies to Bucky Irving and applies to Chris Godwin. They want to ramp up their practice reps to evaluate their availability for Sunday. So here's how I'm going to take that. The coaching staff is hoping there's a chance for this Sunday. I'm with Brian on this. It seems more logical to me that this is going to be at least one more week, but maybe this is the last week that you don't have Bucky Irving. I think there's a real possibility that's the case. So that could be the good news there for this one. If Bucky Irving misses another game, Sean Tucker, and this should be no surprise to anybody, has taken over as the lead running back of that backfield. Rachaad White still outsnapped Sean Tucker. I think that comes as a shock to people with the way Sean Tucker went off last week, but he still outsnapped him. He's still going to have his 3rd down, 2-minute roll, passing roll. Okay, that's still going to be his game. Sean Tucker is still going to be the lead back now, though. And I think the lead guy getting the work in the goal line, too. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does work a little bit more into Rachaad White's receiving role. Rachaad White's just not an efficient back. He's not very good. He can catch the ball in the backfield. There's not really much else he can do. And Sean Tucker proved last week he's got the explosiveness to do a little bit, at least, of that Bucky Irving role. I think they let him do it for one more week before Irving actually comes back. Isaiah Pacheco dealing with the MCL. What do we got here?
Yeah, so he actually did get back on the practice field so far this week. On Wednesday, he got a full day in, I think, but he was wearing a big, bulky brace, and I'm sure that wasn't very comfortable. I think he actually did a limited session then again on Thursday. I don't think he's ready. He's still going to be probably week to week. I can almost guarantee you that he might not feel comfortable until he's able to shed that brace, because most running backs, especially at that position, with all the maneuverability you need and the agility required to play at this level, they don't like playing with these big, bulky braces on that are sometimes helpful coming off an MCL sprain. So I would expect that maybe next week he comes back. I'm not so sure about this week, though.
Yeah, and you don't want him to come back too soon because you need Pacheco to have a little pop. Otherwise, you're going to get 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And I know that's exactly what Kareem Hunt is. The difference is Kareem Hunt actually gets the goal line work, so we have a chance to get a touchdown, where Pacheco really has not to this point. So, look, I'm looking at it this way. I'm not rostering Pacheco. What are you holding on to for? The 9 points, the 8 points that maybe you'll get if he takes back his lead role at some point in this offense, knowing that Kareem Hunt's still going to be involved, knowing Brashard Smith's going to be involved, knowing that he has touchdown limited ability because the Chiefs are just throwing the ball constantly anyway. Like, there's no real reason in my mind to own Isaiah Pacheco. There's no upside there. None. So go ahead and drop him if you have him. Move on. For now, Hunt can be a dependent touchdown running back while Pacheco's out. And then even after that, I don't know how much you're going to be playing Hunt either for your fantasy football playoffs. Trey Benson finally got some movement on the ankle issue. So what do you got?
Well, it sounds like the team has officially opened up his practice window coming off IR. He was limited and considered day-to-day while they're evaluating his availability. It's been so long since I've spoken about him, and since we originally broke down his injury, I forget exactly what he was dealing with. I know it was an ankle issue, but
high ankle.
Oh yeah. So I mean, that makes sense. Again, a lot of times they will come back prematurely from this. So the fact that they put him on IR and he's been out for quite a while is definitely optimistic. But again, you're gonna want to see him get at least a full day's work in before he gets cleared and is ultimately suiting up and playing. So it could be next week. We'll see.
I think this is very similar to the Bucky Irving situation where it might not be this week, but I do feel like it's going to be next week at the very least here. And that's the good news. While he's out, Bam Knight and Michael Carter are going to be the guys in the committee because Amari Demercado had an ankle issue. And I don't think there's any expectation he's going to play. Not worth talking about either, Brian. Somebody who is, though, Samaje Perine, dealing with his ankle issues or any movement on Samaje Perine.
No, and he's got a high ankle sprain that he's been dealing with, and he hasn't practiced yet this week as of Thursday, and is considered doubtful for this week. And we're not going to see too much movement on this front because he's only a few weeks into this, I think. So this might be a couple more weeks before we still see him.
It's just so big with Chase Brown's usage that Samaje Perine misses. He was only playing between 53 and 63% of the snaps with Samaje Perine on the field. The last 2 weeks without Perine, we're talking 90% snap count. Like over the top bell cow workload usage. Christian McCaffrey level workload usage out of Chase Brown with Samaje Perine out of the way. And Chase Brown has responded to say, hey, I am still explosive. I can still make guys miss. I am still good. And now he's getting the opportunities to go with it. And maybe, who knows, Joe Burrow might even be back to give him a little boost too. So yeah, this is good news for Chase Brown, with Samaje Perine still out. All right, finally dive into the wide receivers. Do we think Marvin Harrison gets to return?
No, no, he's not coming back this week. And I originally said at least 2. And he hasn't done anything yet on the practice field. Let's not forget, he had an appendectomy, so he had his appendix removed. Now, that surgery is a lot better these days. They can do it through very small incisions in a laparoscopic technique, which really cuts down the recovery time. But even 2 weeks is pretty optimistic. It's going to be at least probably not till next week before we really know. He hasn't done anything on the practice field. He's still recovering. So, and as far as we know, everything has gone fine with his recovery, and the surgery was successful, and there's been no complications. So that considered, I don't think we see him back until the earliest next week.
Okay, so keep your eyes on that. In the meantime, Michael Wilson had 15 catches and 185 yards in the absence of Jacoby Brissett, broke the NFL record for 47 completions as he just threw and threw and threw and threw, and it was all going to Trey McBride and Michael Wilson, just like it would have been if it was Marvin Harrison. So give him credit. Michael Wilson with no Marvin Harrison is a top 24 play heading into this week, if nothing else, just for the sheer volume. I know the Jaguars stomped out and absolutely out-physicaled and destroyed the Chargers through and through this past week when they had been a pass funnel and you were leaning on Ladd McConkey, you were leaning on Rhamondre Gatson, you may have even been playing Quentin Johnson and Keenan Allen, and I know you were playing Justin Herbert, and everything just went to hell in a handbasket. I get it. The Jaguars defense is not that dominant, guys. It's even against Arizona. That's not really what they are. And this time they're going from east to west coast instead of the other way around. I say all that to say this. I am not scared by the Jacksonville secondary. This is a secondary that you can take advantage of. They've still allowed the 12th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position so far this season. You can get Michael Wilson in there and feel pretty confident about it with Marvin Harrison out. Speaking of the Jaguars, do we have any movement on Brian Thomas?
Just that he was a limited participant on Thursday as he recovers from what now later was reported, I think, about as a high ankle sprain, which initially I think there was some confusion about what exactly the injury was and what the severity was, but it turns out that it was a high ankle sprain, although I think they called it a mild high ankle sprain. And so he was limited in practice. So I don't know if we're going to see him back just quite yet.
Jacoby Myers. Who'd have thunk? Jacoby Myers just walks in and becomes the lead wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars. But that's exactly what's happened since he's been traded. And now he went from playing only 20 snaps to increasing to playing an actual starter load of snaps. And you're probably going to see him increase his snap count even further in a game that will probably be a little more competitive than it was a week ago. Jacoby Myers, I don't feel great about playing him, but if he's going to get this kind of workload, and it's already clear he's the number one read, number one target for Trevor Lawrence, I think you can play him as a low-end wide receiver 3 flex play heading into PPR leagues. I would feel much better about it in full-point PPR, but this is a play that you can have if Brian Thomas can continue to miss. Parker Washington, guys, is not a thing. Stop trying to make him a thing. ECR is trying to make him a thing. I don't get it. The guy's had 4 targets in his best game. Like, stop making him a thing. He's not involved enough in the offense. This is a run-first offense now with one wide receiver who can eat. And right now, that one wide receiver is Jacoby Myers. All right. Calvin Ridley. Wow, man, we waited forever for this guy to get back, and he breaks his fibula.
Yeah, not only that, it was like the first play or first catch that he had since he got back after missing so much time with a hamstring injury. Really tough way for things to play out here for him, unfortunately. Some reports, I think he actually may have had surgery now. I wasn't sure if he was or not. Whether he did or not, his season was done. They placed him out on season-ending IR. Either way, this should not affect him going forward into next season. I think he'll be ready come preseason, and hopefully no lingering effects from this. The only question I have, and I'm not quite sure of this, is the type of fracture that he had and where on the fibula it was, because that could mean any number of things. Now, the odds are that if he did have surgery to fix it, that it could have been something that affected the ankle joint as well, and that would be my only real concern going forward and possibly extending into next year would be if there was any ankle injury involvement, meaning he had a fractured fibula and maybe fractured another bone in and around the ankle as a result, or possibly had some ligament damage as a result of that as well, which may have been addressed at surgery also. So that would be the only kind of thing that might change my opinion a little bit. But again, I think, timing-wise, he has enough time to make it back in time for next preseason and be a full go.
I mean, just think Chris Godwin, if that's going to wind up being the case.
Well, that's what it sounds like. It might be similar in nature as far as the injury goes.
And that's the danger of it, because Chris Godwin has dealt with it again this season, wasn't able to play a lot of games there too. So we'll keep an eye on that. Also on top of it, Alec Aomenor got a hamstring injury. I don't believe he's practiced.
No, he has not as of this Thursday. And again, with hamstrings, man, this could be a several-week absence, and this could extend for quite a while. If not treated appropriately and managed cautiously. We've seen plenty of players try to come back too soon, get it re-aggravated. We've seen guys have some serious time out because of them, a.k.a. Calvin Ridley. So not something to rush back from until we see him be able to do something at practice. That tells me that he's really not doing much at all and is probably just getting some basic treatments right now.
So if Calvin Ridley's gone, Aomenor is gone, then that only leaves Chimere Dike as the last man left standing. Now, look, if you don't want to play any Tennessee Titan against the Seattle Seahawks, not going to argue with you at all. Not even a lick. But if he's the last man left standing, and he was already looking like he was starting to gain some momentum over the past few weeks, which he had been, I think there is, in a full-point PPR league, a base floor if you need a spot start that is somebody just to catch the ball. It's likely going to be him. I don't think they're going to move him to the outside because these two guys are hurt. I think they're going to keep him within his slot role. As long as they do that, he'll at least have a floor of some sort now, and then maybe even a little bit of upside in the weeks to come, because again, to your point, we know Calvin Ridley's out for the rest of the year, and Aomenor may be out for multiple weeks too. So Chimere Dike is the guy to look at in a spot start there. Kayshon Boutte coming back from a hamstring injury. What do you think?
Yeah, so he actually returned to full practice earlier in the week, got another full session in on Thursday. It sounds like he is actually going to be cleared and should be good for a return this weekend.
Yeah, so this is another one. There's a lot of interesting playing time battles going on with the Patriots right now, because Stephon Diggs got ratcheted up the last 2 weeks in his fantasy value, but mostly due to his playing time. And his playing time was a direct result of Kayshon Boutte getting this hamstring injury and going out. And it's allowed Stephon Diggs, who wasn't playing a ton in two receiver sets, to suddenly be on the field the amount of time you would want him to be on the field to be a consistent fantasy relevant player. So now with Boutte back, do they go back to that? Because it's so clear Stephon Diggs is the best wide receiver on that team. Do they go back to that? Is Diggs hit the point now in his recovery where you can trust that he can be on the field that much? I think all of those are going to be questions that we're looking for answers for come Sunday. The good news is that they're playing the Cincinnati Bengals. And Stephon Diggs, the Bengals are actually sneakily kind of tough against wide receivers, but only DJ Turner, who plays the slot. And that's the other interesting part about this. Stephon Diggs is not playing the slot at all with Kayshon Boutte out. So how do they play him when that happens? And then mix in Matt Collins, who they've wanted to mix in. I think you can still play Stephon Diggs as a top 24 wide receiver for this week because of the matchup. But we're going to be watching this because there's a lot of questions that need to be answered as far as how much you can depend on Diggs moving forward. Darius Slayton, do you think he plays?
I don't. He was only doing some individual work and limited stuff at that on the sideline during Thursday's practice. So I'm not sure we're going to see him just yet.
Refer back to earlier in the episode, I talked about what wide receivers would have the fantasy value there. If Slayton's out and it is Jameis Winston, I don't care that Isaiah Hodgins was the lead receiver. I'm not playing anybody. I don't want to play anybody. Tight ends, let's move on to them. So Sam Laporta, and I brought this back up only because he went on IR after we talked last week. So I wanted to see if you had an update on that.
I don't, but with back injuries, man, this could mean any number of things. My guess is that it's significant enough that he might be requiring some form of injection treatments or therapy, which is really going to require a lot of rest time in order to make those injections effective. It doesn't sound like I've heard any reports, at least, or I have not heard any reports, at least, of him having to undergo any surgical procedures. My guess is, though, it's a pretty significant back issue, and they don't want this to become a chronic thing. So he could be undergoing extensive therapy, but also might be getting some injection therapies. And that would make sense because the only way that those are going to work is with extended periods of rest, and that's why he's already been placed on IR. So that would make sense to me.
With Sam Laporta out, Jameson Williams not only is benefiting from the play calling of Dan Campbell, but then we have target consolidation now. Because now it's just not St. Brown, and then is it a Williams game or a Laporta game or a Jahmyr Gibbs game? No, it's St. Brown, Williams, and then the running backs are going to get theirs. Laporta get it taking out of the equation, consolidates it, and we've seen it because Jameson Williams now he's going to a floor in volume to 23% of the target share when he was at 19%. With Sam Laporta on the field. So you take that combined with the nice matchups the Detroit Lions have, combined with the Dan Campbell play calling, which already naturally has Jameson Williams getting more involved. And all of a sudden, Williams is looking like a top 20 wide receiver like we thought he could be all season long, but wasn't getting the consistent enough work. That's where we are now with Jameson Williams, a must-play due to this injury. David Njoku knee issue. What do you have here?
Well, he had a knee issue earlier in the year, and it sounds like this just flared up on him. He missed some practice time middle of the week. Was not participating on Thursday. They're saying he's day-to-day, but it sounds like he's actually going to be doubtful for this weekend. I don't think it's a new injury, though. It just sounds like it was a flare-up from whatever he was dealing with previously, which did cause him to miss some time.
Yeah, and I never want to count David Njoku out. That guy always finds a way to get on the field somehow, some way, but it sounds like maybe this time, he might not. I'm kind of with you on this. If he goes away, that obviously helps, again, target consolidation for Harold Fannin. As I already laid out, though, with Shedeur Sanders starting, I might want to see how that plays out for a week. Either way. Isaiah Likely dealing with a calf issue. What's your update here?
Well, he did get in a limited session on Thursday, so it sounds like he's working through it or at least working back from it. It doesn't sound like it was a serious issue, either a slight strain or maybe even just some cramping or tightness in the calf that they were just being cautious with, but it doesn't sound like a serious one. If he can work his way back onto the practice field on Friday and get a full session in, he should be ready to go this weekend. Otherwise, he's going to carry a questionable tag and could be a game time decision.
You can't play Isaiah Likely, but you have to hold your nose, close your eyes, and pray when you have to play Mark Andrews. And he had that wonderful, fake tush push 35-yard run, and he booked it too. It made me feel good to see Mark Andrews be able to run that fast because honestly I wasn't sure if he had it in him anymore. We haven't seen him actually look fast in years, it feels like at this point. So to see him run that 35 yards in that play, I'm like, oh, he can still move. It is still possible.
Didn't he clock like his highest rate run speed too or something?
Ever. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, the old man still got it. It just doesn't get the ball consistently. And doesn't get the ball outside the red zone. I don't get it, but that's been the case. And maybe if it likely was out of the way, it would be a little bit more target consolidation because, again, these guys split playing time, and that has a lot to do with why Andrews isn't more consistent than he is. But right now, I think you can just play him as a touchdown-dependent tight end and just hold your nose and pray you get that touchdown because otherwise it might be a brutal day any other direction you sell it. That's going to do it for today's show. Guys, I hope you all enjoyed it. I always appreciate Dr. Brian Scott coming on to the show. Doc, what do you got coming up next and what should people check out?
Well, the holidays are almost here. Things are kind of winding down as far as fantasy football goes, but I'll still be around up until Christmas time. I've got some my Tuesday podcast coming out every week just to kind of do a recap of the weekend games and any new injuries that may have unfolded. Usually I'll try and incorporate the Monday night game as well, and that I'll usually release on Tuesday morning. And then, of course, Operation Domination Dan every week. We do our thing. And then TSS Fantasy, I do the injury updates for that sports podcast network on Friday nights and Sunday mornings, and you can catch me there as well. And then actually doing a big episode with Deb Wickus at the Blonde Blitz, which is an awesome podcast. I'll be doing that December 3rd. We'll do a live stream of her show as well.
Awesome stuff. Make sure you check them out at the Injured List podcast on social media. I'll be back tomorrow with Chaz Filardi of Sports Betting Weekly to line your pockets green. And then I might have an announcement for what next week with Thanksgiving is going to look like. We're still going to get you your content. Don't you worry. But we'll find out what the schedule is going to be tweaked to then. Until then, guys, good luck, and I'll see you tomorrow.